Once Upon a Bedtime Story presents
The Fish and the Ring by Flora Ann Steele. Once upon a time there lived a baron who was a great magician and can tell by his arts and charms everything that was going to happen at any time. Now this great lord had a little son born to him as heir to all his castles and lands. So when the little lad was about 4 years old, wishing to know what his fortune would be, the baron looked in his book of fate to see what it foretold. And lo and behold, it was written that this much-loved, much-prized heir to all the great lands and castles was to marry a low-born maiden. So the baron was dismayed and set to work by more arts and charms to discover if this maiden were already born, and if so, where she lived. And he found out that she had just been born in a very poor house, where the poor parents already had 5 children. So he called for his horse and rode far away until he came to the poor man's house, and there he found the poor man sitting at his doorstep very sad and doleful. "What is the matter, my friend?" asked he, and the poor man replied, "May it please thee, your honor, a little lass has just been born to our house, and we have 5 children already. Where the bread is to come from to fill this sick's mouth, we know not." "If that be your trouble," said the baron, "maybe I can help you. So don't be downhearted. I am just looking for such a little lass to be a companion to my son. So, if you will, I will give you 10 crowns for her." Well, the man, he nigh jumped for joy, since he was to get good money, and his daughter, he thought, a good home. Therefore he brought out the child then and there, and the baron wrapped the babe in his cloak, rode away, but when he got to the river he flung the little thing into the swollen stream, and said to himself as he galloped back to his castle, "There goes fate." But as you see, he was just sore mistaken, for the little lass didn't sink. The stream was very swift, and her long clothes kept her up till she caught in a snag just opposite a fisherman, who was mending his nets. Now the fisherman and his wife had no children, and they were just longing for a baby. So when the good man saw the little lass, he was overcome with joy, and took her home to his wife, who received her with open arms. And there she grew up, the apple of their eyes, into the most beautiful maiden that ever was seen. Now, when she was about 15 years of age, it so happened that the baron and his friends went a hunting along the banks of the river and stopped to get a drink of water at the fisherman's hut. Who should bring the water out but, as they thought, the fisherman's daughter. The young men of the party noticed her beauty, and one of them said to the baron, "She should marry well. Read us her fate, since you are so learned in the art." Then the baron scarce looked at her and said carelessly, "I could guess her fate, some wretched yokel or other, but to please you, I will cast her horoscope by the stars. So tell me, girl, what day were you born?" "That I cannot tell, sir," replied the girl, "for I was picked up in the river about 15 years ago." Then the baron grew pale, for he guessed at once that she was the little lass he had flung into the stream, and that fate had been stronger than he was, but he kept his own counsel and said nothing at the time. Afterwards, however, he thought out a plan, so he rode back and gave the girl a letter. "See you," he said, "I will make your fortune. Take this letter to my brother, who needs a good girl, and you will be settled for life." Now the fisherman and his wife were growling old and needed help, so the girl said she would go, and took the letter. And the baron rode back to his castle, saying to himself once more, "There goes fate."
Thank you for listening to this production from Once Upon a Bedtime Story. If you remember a favorite bedtime story from your childhood, I'd love to hear about it. Go to onceupon-a-bedtimestorry.com/remember and fill out the contact form. And while you're there, click on the subscribe link so you don't miss out on any of our bedtime stories.
For that he had written in the letter was this: "Dear brother, take the bearer of this and put her to death immediately." But once again he was sore mistaken, since on the way to the town where his brother lived, the girl had to stop the night in a little inn, and it so happened that the very night a gang of thieves broke into the inn, and not content with carrying off all that was the innkeeper possessed, they searched the pockets of the guests and found the letter which the girl carried, and when they read it they all agreed that it was meant a mean trick and a shame. So their captain sat down and, taking a pen and paper, wrote instead, "Dear brother, take the bear and marry her to my son without delay." Then, after putting the note into the envelope and sealing it up, they gave it to the girl and bade her go on her way. So when she arrived at the brother's castle, though rather surprised, he gave orders for a wedding feast to be prepared, and the baron's son, who was staying with his uncle, seeing the girl's great beauty, was not unwilling, so they were fast wedded. Well, when the news was brought to the baron, he was beside himself, but he was determined not to be outdone by fate. So he rode quickly to his brother and pretended to be quite pleased, and then one day, when no one was near, he asked the young bride to come for a walk with him. And when they were close to some cliffs, he seized hold of her and was for throwing her over into the sea, but she begged hard for her life. "It is not my fault," she said. "I have done nothing. It is fate. But if you will spare my life, I promise that I will fight against fate also. I will never see you or your son again until you desire it. That will be safer for you, since, see, the sea may preserve me, as the river did." Well, the baron agreed to this, so he took off his gold ring from his finger and flung it over the cliffs into the sea and said, "Never dare to show me your face again until you can show me that ring likewise." And with that he let her go. Well, the girl wandered on, and she wandered on until she came to the nobleman's castle, where they were needing a kitchen girl, so she took to work. Now one day, as she was cleaning a big fish, she looked out the kitchen window, and who should she see riding by up to dinner but the baron and his young son, her husband. At first she thought that to keep her promise she must run away, but afterwards she remembered that they would not see her in the kitchen, so she went on with her cleaning of the big fish. And lo and behold, she saw something shine in the insides of the fish, and there, sure enough, was the baron's ring. She was glad enough to see it, I can tell you, so she slipped it on her thumb. But she went on with her work and dressed the fish as nicely as she ever could, and served it up as pretty as may be, with parsley sauce and butter. Well, then it came to the table, and the guests liked it so well that they asked for the host who cooked it. And she called to his servants, "Send up the cook who cooked that fine fish, that she may get her reward." Well, when the girl heard that she was wanted, she made herself ready, and with the gold ring on her thumb, she went boldly into the dining hall, and all the guests, when they saw her, were struck dumb by her wondrous beauty. And the young husband started up gladly, but the baron, recognized her, jumped up angrily, and looked as if he would kill her. So without one word, the girl held up her hand before his face, and the gold ring shone and glittered on it, and she went straight up to the baron, and laid her hand with the ring on it before him, on the table. Then the baron understood that fate had been too strong for him, so he took her by the hand, and placed her beside him, and turned to the guests and said, "This is my son's wife. Let us drink a toast in her honor." And after dinner he took her and his son home to the castle, where they all lived as happily as could be forever afterwards.
Thank you for listening to this production from Once Upon a Bedtime Story. If you remember a favorite bedtime story from your childhood, I'd love to hear about it. Go to onceuponabedtimestory.com/remember and fill out the contact form. And while you're there, click on the subscribe link so you don't miss out on any of our bedtime stories.